The Peace Dependency podcast is brought to you by Total Red NES. Shop your Goofy Food Controller TWO merch and CTWC approved hardware on TotalRedNES.com. Welcome to the Peace Dependency podcast. I'm your host, Frank, also known as Sir Macer. Today on the show, we have a true DAS master as our guest. NGC Man is the winner of both the test and real tournaments of Classic Tetris DAS and was grinding for 3 years to get a 1.3 score with the Playstyle. The 1.3 finally happened on New Year's Day of 2023, but that was a little bit late for the recording. Nonetheless, we get a great insight in the life of NGC. We talked about the 1.3 grind, his Game 7 in the finals of the real CTDAS tournament, and his mindset during matches. This is our conversation. NGC Man, welcome to the Peace Dependency podcast, and thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, not a problem. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Hey, first question is always the same question for everyone who's new on a podcast, and that is, how did you get into NES Tetris?
Well, like most people, it's a long story, and it dates back all the way to 2005 when I got one of my very first video games as a present. It was this very old, clunky, cheap Tetris game that was handheld. It wasn't played on any particular system. It was all in black and white. And it was one of those toys where I probably played once a year, just kind of off and on for probably most of my childhood. And then I eventually lost it, and so I no longer have that, which makes me sad a little bit.
Was that like a $5 handheld system, 999 games in one?
It might have been. I know it had a couple of other games on there. I'm not sure about 900, but I think like Centipede was one of them. There were a couple of other retros on there that I didn't play as much, so maybe like 5 or 10 games in one, but yeah, something cheap like that.
Yeah.
And so that was my first exposure, was back in 2005, but I think I stopped or I lost that thing around 2012, 2013, and then I was kind of a dead period until 2017. I would have been either a junior or a senior in high school. At that period, I saw my very first Classic Tetris video online. And it just so happened to be a random match in the top 32 of the 2016 Classic Tetris World Championships featuring Ben Mullen. And so Ben Mullen was my very first exposure to the competitive Tetris scene. And he's also my Tetris hero. And so
yeah.
I'm sure we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we will. Because I knew that when we had Ben on the show, you told me that Ben was your Tetris idol.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Ben is, I love the way, even back then, I love the way that he plays. I love his personality, both during matches and post-commentary, and just the way he interacts with the rest of the community. I mean, he's a really cool guy. So I haven't gotten to talk to him too much. But Ben, if you're out there and you're hearing this, you're my hero. So, kudos to you. You're awesome.
So you saw Ben Mullen versus, I have no clue who he faced in 2016, but you saw Ben's match, top 32. And what were you thinking when you saw that match?
So at first, I was basically just kind of scrolling through YouTube recommended. I wasn't thinking too much of it. But I've always been a big math guy, and the thumbnail, or maybe like the video preview as I was scrolling, kind of showed like these pieces falling and these people staring at screens and these numbers going up by roughly 20,000, which I thought was a big number. And so that kind of like got me to click on it. And then for about 5 seconds I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, why am I watching this video? I wanted to watch Minecraft videos. I wanted to watch Terraria videos. That's what I came out of YouTube for this day.
Yeah.
But 10 seconds go by and I'm like, oh, he just cleared some I remember that. I was 5 and I played that game. That's right. Oh, and he just did it too. Wait a minute, they got really high scores. I used to get like 10,000. Now they're at like 400,000. Like, wait a minute, right? And so I just keep watching and watching. And
Yeah.
like everybody else, just I slowly get mesmerized, and then finally, you know, I fell into a trance. The video, I have it in front of me. It's an hour and 15 minutes long. It felt like 5 minutes by the time it got done, and I'm like, I just burned an hour on this. I got to check this out some more. And so then the very next video that I saw was of course, the Boom Tetris for Jeff video. And so from that point on, that's when I started to get hooked. And then I started following the scene, and I didn't see it live on Twitch, but I caught the replay shortly after of Joseph defeating Jonas in 2018. And then basically from that moment on is when I decided that I wanted to end up playing the game.
So how did you try to follow the scene back in 2017, early 2018?
To be honest, I didn't follow it much. At that point, I had no idea of the Discord community. Basically, I would just try and look up different videos on the CTWC YouTube channel. So I ended up seeing a couple of matches from Harry, a couple of matches from Quaid, a couple of matches from Alex Kerr. I didn't watch them all back then because I was big into sports and I didn't have a ton of time. So it was more like a here or there thing late at night when I wanted to kick my feet up and relax.
Yeah.
It was once I got to 2018 is when I really started to get more involved.
And was it only CTWC matches that you saw, or did you catch the early parts of CTM Masters?
Regrettably, only CTWC. Yeah, I had no knowledge of the Masters event until probably either late 2018 or early 2019, I think was my first exposure. But yeah, no, back then it was just CTWC.
So how did you slowly got more into the community, or slowly got more into the competitive side of NES Tetris, that you started watching masses and that you started watching the other tournaments that various organizers were organizing?
So it's funny, back then, I mean, I've wanted to play ever since I saw for sure the Boom Tetris for Jeff video, but even probably since I saw Ben play, I knew I wanted to play this game, but I didn't really know exactly how to acquire the console and all the specifics of like playing on a CRT and how all the streaming stuff worked. So for a while, I kind of felt like, maybe I'll play, maybe I won't. I'm kind of busy. We'll see what happens. But what kept me hooked is that I kind of like lived vicariously through the players that I was watching, in that from very early on, probably like after 7 or 8 matches, I stopped watching so much for the entertainment value, and I started trying to like predict the moves of the players as they were happening. And that became kind of like my addiction. And so I didn't actually play the game, but I played it in my head as I was watching the videos. And once I started doing it that way, and that was probably around early 2018, that's when I actually went back and I watched pretty much every single video on the CTWC channel. And then right around that time as well, I saw some comments talking about CTM. And so then I started, looking up that stuff on Twitch and VODs and stuff. And so I don't remember if there was a ton of CTM stuff on YouTube back then, but I do remember having my my sister show me how to look up VODs on Twitch, because I literally, like, streaming Twitch, all that stuff, like, was completely foreign to me. Like, she introduced me to everything. I was always just a YouTube normie. But big shout out to my sister for helping me out with that stuff.
So without your sister, there wouldn't be an NGC Man in the Tetris community.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, she gets all the credit. And she's going to watch this too, so.
Oh boy, big pressure, big pressure.
Yeah.
No, but when did you started playing? And did you start playing on hardware, or did you started playing on an emulator first?
So my very first game of Tetris was on console, and it was January 1st, 2020. So the start of the year. It was a Christmas present at the end of 2019. And you're probably thinking, why didn't I start it on Christmas? Or why didn't I start the day after? Well, I got the console, I got the controller, I got the cartridge, but I didn't have a TV, at least one that I could hook it up to. I did some reading online beforehand, and obviously with it being a retro game and those very static colors, it can sometimes ruin the nicer TVs. And so knowing that, we didn't want to hook it up to any of the TVs we use regularly around the home. So I had to spend a few days, and I actually started on LCD. I did not start on CRT. But I got one. brought it up to my room. I was actually playing with the TV on the ground for a couple of months before I can get a stand for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the first game was January 1st of 2020. My very first game was a level 2 start, and I think I got 14,000. And then slowly, within the first day, I worked my console PB up to about 120K.
So you got the what is it? Cutter drill ending, the true ending of NES Tetris, 120K or above.
Something like that. Yep.
Yeah. Let's back it up a little bit, because you started being a little bit more invested in the scene early 2018, mid 2018. But what did you do from 2018 and 2019 then, before you started playing in 2020?
Yeah, so that was 100% watching, like, of course, every new iteration of CTWC, watching back all of those matches. And then, of course, I didn't watch every CTM match across those 2 years, but whenever possible, I tried to watch all the VODs back before they expired. So
Yeah.
I'd say, roughly speaking, I saw about 70% of them. But the best part was, of course, Corion's insane run, where he basically was just annihilating everybody. And so I was there for most of that. And I guess I have to give Corion some credit too, because between him and Joseph and the evolution of hyper tapping and everything, like the storyline and and everything that surrounded it was so charismatic. Top with the fact that Corion was basically unbeatable in that. That kind of like kept my interest of like, who's going to be the next person to beat Corion, and it wasn't many. So
it's such a shame that Corion never won a world title.
I know. He came so close 2 or 3 times.
Chris Tang said it. If Corion a year later was the Corion a year prior, he would have won it.
Oh yeah, almost certainly. Pretty much every year he competed, I think.
But when you started playing NES Tetris on New Year's Day in 2020, what was the playstyle that you used?
I'm not even sure you could call it a specific style, because I definitely started thinking I wanted to be a hyper tapper, but not knowing the controls on console very well, being it was my first day. I figured out very quickly like kind of how the basic DAS mechanics worked, like nothing complicated like quick taps and wall charges and all that, but just how to move the pieces and like how to let go when it got to the certain column. And so typically for like the easier moves, I tended to use DAS, and for the first couple games I started on lower levels so I can get away with it. I did play a few 18 starts on my first day, and I think I got like somewhere along the line of like 10, 12 lines, something like that. So nothing crazy. It was way too fast for me to survive consistently at the time. But I definitely was tapping quite a bit, especially just because I hadn't gotten my DAS timings down yet. And I also didn't have like the best game sense of like how to stack in real time. So
how did you train that? How did you improve the stacking, your DAS, and do the wall charges, do the quick taps?
Yeah, so that came probably a lot later. I think that when I first started out, the biggest obstacle for me was just learning the controls and being able to do all of the basic movements without looking at the controller or without thinking like, okay, I'm pressing the A button or I'm pressing the B button. So it was a lot of like muscle memory development, and honestly, that part alone probably took the better part of like 2 or 3 months to get used to. And so in the very early goings, it was mostly, and built into that was the LCD delay, because for those who don't know, when you play on a CRT TV, that's what most, not all, but most players who use console will play on CRT, because there's little to no input delay. When you press the button, the action happens almost instantaneously. Whereas with LCD, it varies from TV to TV, but typically speaking, you're looking at like 3 to 6 frames of delay. And so because of that delay, I didn't notice it at first when I was first starting out, because I'm like, oh, this is just how the game works. I had no idea how, like, the difference at the time. And so, but I had a very hard time of like controlling DAS, and I was losing it randomly left and right. I'm like, what's going on? And so back then, I basically was somewhat of like a hyper tapper for like the months of, I'd say, March, April, May 2021, or 2020, excuse me. Just because I couldn't control DAS very well. And hyper tapper is an overstatement. I was probably like 8 hertz, 9 hertz, so nothing crazy at the time, but
slower than DAS.
Oh yeah, big time.
How frustrating was those first 2-3 months then?
So when playing console, very, especially because, and this is the fun part of the story. January 3rd, 2020. So my third day of playing, I actually got a 600K on emulator. Because I basically January 1st played console for like 2 or 3 hours. And then I had to go to a relative's house, holiday time. We were spending time with them. But of course, I didn't bring my console with me, but I was so hooked and so excited I wanted to continue playing. So I ended up playing some emulator on my laptop, which I brought over to their house.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. You know who you are. But the second day, I ended up going back to school. And between classes, I played for about 2 hours and got somewhere around a 300, 400K on emulator. And then the third day, before my first class, I actually got the 600K. And funny enough, it was a 600K transition that I cleared 0 lines on level 19. So all my points were scored.
Sounds like a normal game to me.
Yeah.
You started playing NES Tetris on New Year's Day 2020. Did you play on emulator before 2020?
Nope. Yeah, so emulator happened the same day as console. It was one of those things where partially I didn't know it existed, and then once I right before I got the console, I kind of had an idea that maybe you could play online or download some sort of ROM or whatever, which I ended up just playing, I think like Tetris.com or something simple like that. So it wasn't actually the base game. I think the RNG was a little different, but anyway. But yeah, no, I didn't play emulator beforehand. Once I got the console, it was like, oh crap, I'm not home, but I want to play. So that was the motivation.
So pretty much to recap, on your third day of playing NES Tetris, you got a 600K.
Yep. Pretty much.
New players, if they have prior experience to Tetris and know how to stack and know how to move the pieces and all that, yeah, okay, it sounds fair. If a guideline player goes to NES Tetris, yeah, it's reasonable that they will get a 600K within a short time. But do you think that because of all the videos that you watched and that after a short time of watching Tetris for entertainment, you started watching Tetris for where are they going to put the pieces and building up that muscle memory and building up how to stack? Do you think that that is the reason that you got a 600K on your third day?
Yeah, I mean, it's the only reason. I mean, basic things like building out your left. I didn't understand parity concepts at all back then, so my T placements back in the day were horrible. But just generally keeping the board sloping from left to right downwards, and how to build for Tetrises safely without getting too risky, and leaving column 9 a little bit lower than column 8 if you can help it, so you have burns. Like basic stuff like that helped me to get started early.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder for me to apply that on console because playing off a controller and not knowing the controls, I couldn't really use DAS, and it was harder to tap that way. But with emulator, I was playing on a keyboard, and obviously that's fixed and it's heavy. And so I can basically I don't have to worry about holding the controller. I can just tap the buttons.
Yes.
And I can use 2 hands freely. And so I had one hand rotating, one hand moving the pieces, and it was a lot easier for me back then. So that's what made it possible. But 100%, like if I hadn't been following the scene, I probably would have taken 6 to 8 months to get my first 600K, which I don't know if you were going to ask me this or not, but the first time I got 600K on console was, I believe, June of 2020 or maybe even July. So it took a while on console.
It's an insane progression because you maxed out within a year, for example, and some players won't have a 600K after 2 years of playing.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know. I've always been pretty good at video games. Like, not to brag, but I was like top 100 in the world in Geometry Dash a long time ago, and I was also pretty decent at like gun game and Call of Duty. So I've had some prior experience with like competitive gaming, but I don't know. It's one of those things where you watch somebody else who's really good do something long enough, and eventually they'll rub off on you. I mean, certainly I made plenty of mistakes back then, and I still do. Nobody's stacking is perfect, but I also did play quite a bit in 2020. That would have been me think about this. That was my second to last year in college. And so back then I probably had a little more free time than I do now. I mean, I work full-time job nowadays, so it's not always as easy to play as often, but yeah, I mean, combination of watching videos, learning stacking. I mean, I was watching Corian of all people, who was like back then it was just the stacking god of Tetris. So
Yeah.
so yeah, and that was the big driver for me.
How did you slowly evolve then your Tetris play over the course of 2020?
Yeah, so I think the first big step for me, once I finally like understood how to play the game and I could play level 19 a little bit, was switching from the LCD to the CRT. And so that happened back in, I want to say April of 2020. And the month of April and maybe a little bit of early May, that was basically just me adjusting to the fact that there was no longer any input delay, which took a couple of weeks. But once I figured it out, I was like, oh my God, this is like night and day, 10 times better. So that's when I really started to take off. I could actually play 19 on console for the first time by the end of May. I actually
Yeah.
got the first kill streak. It was like a 450 or a 500K or so back in June of 2020. And then eventually I worked my way up to get better at 18 on console. I think I transitioned with a high 500 and I got a Tetris or two to end up with like 600, 620, and then I topped out. So that was where the 600K in June came from.
So that was maybe your first goal that you reached, beating your console PB?
Yeah, for sure. It felt really good to beat my emulator PB because I mean the emulator PB was like
Oh yeah.
close to 600 as you can get, like 601 or 602. It was just barely.
Yeah.
I think the other one was like 620. So it felt good to be like, okay, I can at least control the game enough to play at the same potential I was in emulator. Now I can maybe start to learn more stacking concepts and get better at DAS and stuff like that.
So how did you do that? How did you study the game? How did you study to stack better? How did you get better at DAS?
So largely that was trial and error. I actually did not watch as much Tetris back then. I had more fun and I was more content playing it than I was watching it because I had been watching it for so long. And so I think that actually hurt my development a little bit, especially because back then I focused 100% of my energy on learning wall charges. And I'm sure most of the people watching this have a good idea of what those are, but basically if you shift a piece into a wall, it'll automatically fully charge DAS. And so you can use that to keep DAS from piece to piece. The other technique is called, what do they call it? Skill stopping, I think is what they say, which is, in my opinion, a little harder. For some people, it's way easier. So I'm not going to speak to which one I think is better, but that one involves basically timing your next input when the piece is about to spawn. Because for some reason, the game like doesn't check for inputs for a couple of frames. And so if you are making inputs and then you enter those frames and you let go and you push it again, it like doesn't know. And so it thinks you've just been holding the button down the whole time. So I invested zero energy in learning skill stops. And I think that made it a little bit harder for me to max out for the first time. And so actually for the months of like September, October, and even I'd say most of November, the challenge for me was being able to wall charge on like one block high walls on level 19 because you only have 2 frames to do that. And so most of my top outs were because I would attempt one, miss it, make a misdrop, lose DAS, and then the rest is history. So that was the challenge for me back then.
So you pretty much needed frame perfect inputs.
Yeah, or 2 frame perfect. Yes.
Yeah, 2 frame, but it's like 1 block on 19, so it's gone before you know it.
Oh yeah, it's back then it felt almost impossible, and I'm like, why in the world? Like, there's got to be an easier way to do this. But of course, like I said, I wasn't watching tutorials. I wasn't watching matches because I'm an idiot. I should have been. But I'm like, well, I guess this is the only way. I guess I better just get better. But even today, like it's definitely rare nowadays. I do still make those mistakes every here and there. But I've gotten a lot better. But back then it was a real struggle.
So how did you then get involved with the community?
CTWC was in October, obviously, of 2020, and that was the first year it was online. And so I'm thinking to myself, I've got like an 800K, or actually, no, I think I had a 900K PB before the tournament. And I knew I wasn't gonna be able to make it out to Portland that year, but I knew, from my bedroom that's definitely possible. So
Yeah.
I thought I'll sign up, I'll see how I do, maybe I qualify for silver and see what happens. And that is what ended up happening. I got into silver bracket, and then lo and behold, my very first opponent was Ben Mullen, and I actually,
Yes.
which I couldn't believe. So
Well, you qualified 1,001 points above Ben.
is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
If the CTWC 2020 spreadsheet is correct, you qualified 1,001 points above Ben.
Wow. I never knew that. That's crazy.
So you both had 792, 3K, something like that.
Wait,
And
I almost got an 800K average back then? If that's true, I'm pretty proud of 2020 MGC. I just did a qual like a week ago that was worse than that.
and the qual was for?
I think CTM. I may or may not have been trying to make masters because I was already guaranteed futures. So I kind of just played like a banshee, and it didn't work.
Oh yeah. So Ben Mullen qualified with a 793,027 score.
Okay.
And you qualified with a 794,082.
Boom.
28, sorry. 794,028 points.
That's what I'm talking about.
So nearly 800K. So 935 was your PB back then. And you qualified with nearly 800K.
Wow, not bad.
No. So then you played your first match at CTWC 2020. Silver bracket, first match against Ben Mullen. Ben probably had no idea that he was your hero in the Tetris scene, and then you defeated him 2-0.
Yeah, that was an insane match. I think the average winning score was like right around 400K. Both of us were transitioning close to like 300 to 350. So, I mean, that was probably pretty decent for me back then. I think I definitely got lucky. I think Ben was probably a little off his game that day. But yeah, it was an awesome match. I remember like topping out in maybe like level 23, 24 in one of the games. And I think Ben was chasing me down, but we both hit this really bad sequence. It wasn't the same piece sets, but I just got lucky.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot had to go my way. Let's put it that way. But it was just an absolute delight to play him, and an honor to actually win. Like I was blown away. Like I literally told myself after that game, I don't care if I top out twice in a row with 0 lines and just that's my tournament. Like I beat Ben Mullen. Like I'm good.
And then you lost against my Winkers, and my Winkers went up to top 4 of the silver bracket in 2020.
Yep.
So, what was your overall memory of your first ever Classic Tetris tournament?
So I remember thinking to myself, okay, I've been following the scene for a while. I know most of the big names that usually are, been playing for a year or two prior to their first event. I had only been playing for like 9 or 10 months up to that point. So I knew like I still have a lot more time to improve, and I generally understood the stacking of the better players. I mean, obviously not everything. There was some moves I didn't get and some techniques I didn't understand, but generally speaking, I'm like, I think I can do this. And it was a nice confidence booster to at least have qualified and been a part of everything. And I just thought the atmosphere too was incredible, because that was my first ever competitive match. It was also the first time I had ever streamed on Twitch. And also, I should give a big shout out to Doge Nestris, because without Doge, I probably wouldn't have even been able to compete, because he basically taught me how to install Discord and update it, and how to like do VCs, and how to stream on Twitch, and how to make a scene with OBS. I mean, Doge probably spent like the better part of like 5 or 6 hours, like the week before qual started, helping me get everything set up. And I'm sure he did that for others too. So Doge is really cool. So thank you, Doge, for that.
So do you think that was the confidence boost that you needed to get that max out? Because pretty much 2 weeks after your match against Ben and Wing, you got your first max out.
Yeah, I think it was a big confidence booster. It definitely helped. I also think that, after I got eliminated, that was the first time that I actually started watching matches live on Twitch versus watching the VODs or watching YouTube videos. And so I got the advantage of obviously watching it back is the same from an analysis perspective, but watching it in real time as that little adrenaline push and the atmosphere and everything. And
Yeah.
so I think that helped me learn a little bit faster too. But of course, that year being the first year it was online was just revolutionary from a technology standpoint, from a community visibility standpoint, from the level of play jumping higher than we ever thought it could. I mean, it was an absolutely phenomenal event. And so to follow the whole thing and just be like glued to the action for like a week straight was incredible. So that was a big help for sure.
And was it also something that you were like, oh, I can share this with the world. I can share my progress with the world. I can share my the things that I'm struggling with the world, and I can get help.
Yeah, I think that was another big part of it too. More so getting the help part because back then I'll admit I was a little selfish in that I joined the community to try and become a better player. Which I mean, maybe there's nothing wrong with that. I know that's what a lot of people do, and there's a lot of ways to stay involved. But definitely for the first couple of months when I first got into the Discord servers, like CTM was my first, and then shortly after I got into Gauntlet and I got into some of Mark's servers, and so I got into it to kind of become a better player.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, on the road to maxing out, there was like a couple of adjustments that I was missing, and there was a couple of placements that I was doing consistently that were just like blatantly wrong and ruining my stack without me even knowing it. And so having people to kind of point those out and show me the way helped dramatically. I could spend like a day and basically say, oh, this person's giving me this advice. Let me spend like an hour and like every time I see that situation come up, do what they say and then see what happens. And then like 9 times out of 10, they were right. Every once in a while, someone would give advice and maybe I wasn't doing it right, or maybe I wasn't understanding properly, or maybe it was just bad. I don't know. And I would discard it. But like back then, because I was so fresh and I hadn't really been involved so long, I mean, pretty much everything I heard was like gold to me. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, it would like improve. I judged my stacking on like my transition scores back then, and that's kind of what fueled me to become like this like pace maniac that I am, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But back then, like right after CTWC, I was probably when I made transition averaging somewhere between 400 and 450. And right around the time I was getting my max outs, when I actually reached transition, I was averaging closer to like 600K.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of knew that I was ready, was just that I was able to play more efficiently when I had more time to think. And then come 19, when I hadn't built up, the DAS control that I have today and the game sense and the thought speed that I have now, I kind of had to improvise a little more, but knowing that I at least had the efficiency in me, I just had to like stay focused and find it. That was the big part for me. And so yeah, CTWC was a huge help for that.
So after you joined the Discords and after you started asking for help, who are the biggest influences for your game currently or back in the day?
So there's quite a few. I apologize if I don't name everybody. If you feel like you should have been named, DM me and I'll give you credit somehow. But the big ones from the very beginning were Vicious Rhubarb, number one. He was actually my very first Gauntlet opponent. And what ended up happening was during warmups, he got, I don't know if it was I think it was his first 1.2, but he got a 1.2 in warmups right before our match, and then just proceeded to absolutely smoke me. And then for a couple of days we didn't talk at all, but I found out that he was part of a smaller group of guys who were buddies from CTL, and so they ended up reaching out to me and kind of inviting me into their little circle, and so I got to know some players really well. But to add to that list, I'm not sure if anybody has seen Vischer in a while. We have a manhunt out as we speak for him, but Vischer was another huge influence.
Oh man, I restreamed Vischer a couple of times. Now you say it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's a little older. He's doing adult things, which is good for him. But if anybody's seen Vischer, please let me know because I miss him and I want to talk to him again. But no, Vischer was huge with the stacking analysis and I mean some of the best puns in the community. I mean, I'm terrible at that stuff, but he would make me laugh like nonstop. And then also, of course, Mr. Valor. With he gave me a couple coaching sessions, and we talk frequently. And Tugi is another really big one. Tugi, I would consider my rival to this day. Love that guy. He is a great player, one of the best DAS players in the world. Loves the game, has a great passion for the community, and also just a great commentator. So those are the big ones for me.
Yeah.
At least early on. Later on, of course, there's Kingsman, and then there's Sharky for hosting the events, and Van Dweller and Pumpy and all the big names, of course. But when I first started out, it was those four.
When Reward and Fisher and Tuki and all maybe give you advice, is it something you still use today?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, Tugi's big thing for a long time was just keep it simple, build out the left, especially in comp. And, we still joke about it to this day. Every time that I go for a pace session and my right is higher than my left for like the entire game, he just like shakes his head at me like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, maybe if I would have gotten this piece and that piece, then maybe I would have been more efficient. He's like, dude, just please, you're killing me. So I mean, it's all in good fun, of course. But yeah, all of the advice has stuck with me. It's kind of cool when you get to some of the higher levels of play with whatever play style you're using. You kind of learn all the rules, and then you develop a sense of like when it's time to break them.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It's way more fun playing this game when you're able to connect with people and share your achievements and also share your your failures, of course. Because failing on your own is like the worst thing. Because I have a very loving and supporting family, and they don't mind that I play this game. They're very supportive of it, but they also don't care that much, and that's okay. I wouldn't expect them to love the game the way that I do.
Yeah.
To be able to connect with people that really do love the game and are just genuinely really fun and nice to be around. I mean, there's almost nothing better. So,
what is your obsession with pace?
Yeah, so basically, it stems from the fact that when I first started playing this game, Joseph had gotten his 1.3, and when I watched the game, I thought to myself, "This is unbelievable, literally unbelievable." In fact, I'm not sure what video it was on, but there is an old YouTube comment for me that says 1.3 will just never happen. I'm like, I'm convinced it's impossible. There's no way anybody's going to score this high. And then Joseph got a 1.35, and I got like 12 ratios and a bunch of like, haha, stupid, but I deserved it. But from that day, I watched that game, and I'm like, okay, I can't tap like that. I don't think I ever will be able to. I can't staff like that. Maybe one day I'll be able to get close to that. But like, this is my goal. I want to get a 1.3. That is my, like, if I do that, I can retire in peace. And so that was where my obsession with pace started, is like, that was my long-term end game. However long it takes, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then, a year goes by, I get my first max out, and I realize you only have about 1.5 million points to work with before the kill screen. And me being a DAS player, there ain't much I can do past that point. So you only have 200,000 of leeway, which is not a lot in terms of burns. It's probably something on the order of like 40 or 50 across the entire game, which is, of course, not many. So
yeah.
So that was where the obsession started.
So for a 1.3 game, what is your ideal transition?
I think for a player like me, probably 700 pre-transition and 600 post-transition is the ideal. Obviously, it's nice to say, oh, we'll just get a 700. That's easy. But for me, not lately, but in general, it kind of is. I've done it like 50 times now. So, of course I've failed every time to get the 1.3. So never mind that part. But yeah, no, I definitely try to score more on 18 than I do on 19. I'm not gonna, be too modest and say that I have garbage post, but there are definitely some DAS players out there, particularly like Tugi, Mark, Tristop, of course, all of those who have 1.3, but also even I think Sharky and Valor and honestly Alice as well. I mean, all of them have just insanely consistent and insanely efficient post play. And And so I don't really have the confidence yet to go for like a 650. Just because it's, I mean, at that point you're talking about 10 burns in the entire post transition, which is, for me almost impossible. So that's generally what I try to shoot for.
Yeah.
There are some crazy runs where I'll get like a 630 or 650 and then somehow work it all the way up to a 25 max. But every time it's always fizzled out. So
Do you go for a 1.3 all the time when you play for pace?
pretty much. I'd say like 80 to 90% of my practice is just straight up going for 1.3s. If I do end up like getting a max out or a 1.1, then I tend to scale it back the very next game and try to go for the back-to-back. But unfortunately, during the pace grind, most of my max outs and 1.1s are like 1.3 chokes, just because of the nature of the way I'm playing. Because I'm basically like, getting later in the game, 7, 8, 900,000, very few burns remaining. And so I set up these crazy stacks where if I get bailed to get the long bar or I get whatever pieces I need, then I won't take any burns. But if that doesn't happen, I'll basically be too high to survive and I'll just top out.
Do you know in your head how many burns you roughly have during any point of the game?
I don't know about any point, but yes, I have a really good idea of kind of like what I have to do to go for the 1.3. So for example, I actually don't know what the lowest score that you can enter level 23 and still get a 1.3 is. I would imagine it's something close to like 760 or 780. But that's talking, you're literally playing perfect from level 23 on. So generally speaking, I aim for like 850 to 870 with like 900 plus being a bonus. And so if I'm at that point, I know that I have about 8 to 12 burns left, depending on like the digits and stuff and like how many lines I entered level 23 at.
Yeah.
And then of course, you have to max out by 197 lines in order to get a 1.3 by kill screen. If you don't, then your other option is to max out by 201 lines. And then not only do you have to go perfect until kill screen, but you have to get an extra Tetris on the kill screen. And then you can 1.3.
Yeah.
So those are the thresholds I typically look for.
So you look at your score and your line count pretty much constantly at post.
Yeah, I've gotten a pretty good feel of like, I generally don't check after every Tetris, but maybe every second one or third one. And then once I get to 23, I look at the score one more time, and then I kind of stop looking at it and instead count the Tetrises. Because from that point onwards, it's basically 30,000 per Tetris, and the burn kind of minimal because you're not taking many anyway. So even if you take 10 burns, that's only like 10,000 points, which isn't going to influence the calculation very much. So basically, once I get to 23, I just start counting Tetrises. And then when I see the number turn into an A, then I know I've maxed out, and then from there it's a lot easier. But then, of course, that's usually when I die for some reason. It's like right after I max out.
So to me, it is a pretty aggressive training routine.
Oh, it's horrible. I don't recommend anybody do this. Not just because it hasn't worked for me in terms of getting the 1.3. It's for most people, it's actually like really bad for preparing for competition play. Because I'll be honest, even to this day, I don't have like a consistent competition warm-up routine. Like I know Sharky has talked about how he uses B-type frequently. I'm not sure if he still does, but I remember him saying that in the past. I like absolutely despise B-type. I've only probably put maybe 20 or 30 hours into it out of all the time I've played this game. And most of that was just me grinding for 19.4 so that people who said I didn't have it would like shut up. So, and I've gotten it twice now, so there. But yeah, no, so I don't have a warm-up routine. And as a result, sometimes I will enter matches and like forget that I'm not pace running, and then I'll get into a giant dig at the very beginning of the game because idiot.
So the switch between playing for scores or score attack game and playing in comp is difficult to find.
Yes, it is. For me particularly though, like if I'm playing against a hyper tapper or a roller, that's when I tend to have a lot of trouble. Not because they can score higher, but just the perception that I think they can. And so I'm like, oh, well, I know how to pace run. And because I'm a DAS player, I'm probably going to have to push the limits a little if I want to beat these people.
Yeah.
And so that's where I get into trouble. Like a lot of the match, particularly like this year, a lot of my matches against tappers and rollers, I don't feel like I lost because they outplayed me. I feel like I lost because, I just did not make smart decisions, which of course led to them outplaying me.
So, so because of their playstyle, they get in your head.
Oh, 100%. My mental is the worst part about my game. It's not even close. Like the second I start to get tilted over my own mistakes, or if I get a long drought, or those situations where you got the well open for forever, and then you plug it for a second, you get a bar, and then you open it and you plug it again, you get another bar. It's like, dude, So that gets to my head way too easily. I mean, nowadays I've gotten better, especially in comp. Like I haven't really lost my cool in comp in a while. But for sure, 2020 and 2021, it was bad. I would get angry very easily.
So how much time do you devote to NES Tetris?
It varies on the time of year, mostly because I started when I was still in school, and then after I graduated, I was working full time. And so I'd say when I was in school, it was probably more like mornings, I'd say, for like an hour or so, because my classes typically didn't start until 11 o'clock, noonish, most days. And so back in school, I probably played like an hour or two a day consistently for when I was playing. But I did take like a couple weeks off here and there where I didn't play at all. So
Yeah.
probably about an hour a day was average back then. And then nowadays, it's like very sporadic where I'll play a ton for a couple weeks or a month or so, and then I'll like not do anything for a month or two. And the big reason for that is so I'm an actuary, and actuaries have these things called actuarial exams, which we have to study for. And typically speaking, the body that administers these exams recommends that you study 100 hours for every hour of time that they give you to take the exam. And so the shortest exam is 3 hours long, and there's 10 of them. And so generally speaking, you're talking 300 hours per test for 10 tests. Now, I'm not insane, okay? So I don't do 300. I'm going to say that right now. I probably average a lot closer to like 125 to 150. But of course, you're working full time or you're going to school full time, and you got family commitments and sports and things. You have to fit that in somewhere. And so a lot of times, the 2 or 3 hours I have at night, instead of playing Tetris, I was studying for like 3 or 4 months straight. And so that ate up a lot of my time back in the day. And of course, there's more exams to follow, so it's going to continue. But nowadays, when I have the time, I've been doing some longer streams, usually between like 3 and 5 hours.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends on the situation, but generally I try to play as much as I can while still being at least somewhat responsible. Maybe sometimes I'm not. I'll be honest, but yeah, that's about what it is nowadays.
I mean, every adult is sometimes not responsible.
I still feel like a kid.
So I have 2 kids, and sometimes my wife and I go to bed at 2 a.m. because we are watching YouTube, go down the rabbit hole of YouTube, or we watch something on TV, and then we need to watch a show on YouTube, and then boom, it's 2 a.m. in the morning. And we go to bed, and then one of our kids wakes up at 7 a.m. and we look at each other and we're like, oh, damn, we should go to bed earlier. And then the next day we stay up till like 2 a.m.
Yeah, I don't have kids, but I have had those moments where I'll try to end a stream around like midnight or 12:30, but I always like to end on a good game, and so I keep playing. And then
Uno más!
it doesn't happen, and it still doesn't happen. And now it's 2:30, and I'm like, oh, I gotta work tomorrow. So I've definitely had that happen once or twice. And thankfully, I work from home, so on those days, typically, I was pretty much working next to my bed in my pajamas, so it wasn't that bad. Thankfully, it's never happened on a day where I actually had to go into the office. But
Yeah.
I feel your pain slightly.
So you tell us you're an actuary, and I think in a wide sense, it's you're calculating risks and uncertainties and etc.
Oh, for sure.
Is it something what you learn on the job or that you take to the Tetris game?
Oh, that's a really good question. Because for a long time, like I graduated high school in 2018. I thought I wanted to be a doctor back then. It wasn't until right before I went to college that I changed my mind and I decided I wanted to be an actuary. So I did start the actuarial path prior to playing Tetris. But I've always been a very risk averse person, meaning I hate risk. Like if I can do something to eliminate risk or reduce it, I almost always do to a fault. I mean, like there have been times where I've been invited to go downtown and hang out with buddies in an area that I'm not like super thrilled with. You know,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I'm like, what are we doing again? You know, oh, just going to the bars and stuff. I'm like, yeah, let's do something up here more. You know, not down there. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's to a fault sometimes, but yeah, no, I've always loved numbers and statistics in general, and so that's the bulk of like the exam process is just. I mean, there's a lot of calculus. There's a lot of understanding probability distributions, interest rates, finance theory, um, some investment stuff, not much. Actuaries are typically more concerned with like insurance and more consulting avenues than like investing specifically. But what's really cool to me about it is that the skills you learn are applicable to like so many different avenues. Like, I mean, the opportunities are pretty much endless. Like a
Yeah.
land of all things, right? Like a landfill has you put a bunch of garbage in for like however long, and then at the very end, there's like a cost to basically sealing the landfill. But
Mm-hmm.
you have no idea how long it's going to take to seal it, and with inflation and all the different factors, you have no idea how long it's going to take to like actually fill that landfill. And so it's like you have to use actuarial math and predictions to kind of assess the business needs of that situation.
Yeah.
So just numbers. It's literally anything, which I think is awesome.
The number game is what you take home with NES Tetris because you're a pace lover, so you know what you want at transition. You know what you want at level 23. You know when you want to max out. So it's truly a numbers game for you.
100%. Yeah, it's there's nothing more that warms my heart than seeing the score counter increment by 22,800 points.
um, when I looked at the bot, the classic Tetris bot, it says that you're a hybrid player.
Yeah, so the fact that I'm listed as hybrid in the bot, there's a couple of factors that go into it. The first is that I got that 1.19 back in June of 2021, which was actually my first 1.2, which was kind of crazy. But at the time, I thought that I had just obliterated the DAS world record on 19. Because for the longest time, Jonas, rest in peace, the greatest DAS player of all time, undisputed, he had like a high 1.1 from a 19 start.
Yeah.
And then I got a 1.236. So I beat it by like almost 60,000 points. And so in the moment, I actually think I cried. It's just like beside myself, thinking that I had beaten the DAS world record. When it turns out, unknowingly, two of the placements that I made were tapped, and they were tapped faster than the speed limitations of DAS. And so that ruled a hybrid game. And ever since that point, that was kind of what really got my name, I think, what really got my name on the map with some of the higher level players is when they saw that. I was labeled as a hybrid player, which I had no issue with because at that time, like for sure, early to mid 2021, and even going into probably late 2021, hyper tapping in a sense was a big part of my playstyle because I could tap consistently at around 11 hertz.
Yeah.
So not enough to like completely replace quick tapping, but there were sometimes it was all situational where sometimes a quick tap was easier if I wanted to get a bar left, and then sometimes just like tapping it was easier.
Yeah.
And to be honest, to this day, I don't think I can explain to you why. It was just kind of like a feel thing. But the reason I left it my playstyle as hybrid is that I still do rely on some taps here or there to bail myself because I am capable of them. I haven't fully restricted myself to never use them in comp, unless of course I'm playing in DAS only events, in which case I'm very careful, and if I am going to tap something, particularly if I'm trying to tap something fast, I make sure that it's like the move itself is possible with DAS before even attempting it. If it's not, then I'll either just not make the move or I'll look for some other alternative placement so that I don't have to like accidentally tap too fast. So I'm very careful about that stuff when it comes to DAS tournaments. But
is it difficult to make that transition, like that little adjustment that you need to make to your game, because you're not a pure DAS player, but for DAS only tournaments, you need that?
So for a long time, I thought it would be. But what's funny is my best performances have actually come in DAS only events. And I think the reason for that is, like I mentioned, I don't have a warm-up routine for competition. So I'm basically like pace run brain 99% of the time. And then I play a match and it's like, oh, you can't do that right now. And then you take away my tapping and now it's like, oh, you really can't do that right now. And so that it forces me to literally play, I'd say at least 2 rows lower than I'm usually playing.
Yeah.
And make placements that like I will guarantee that I keep DAS on. And so I had this revelation during the first CTDAS test tournament where when I was warming up for it and I did some streams kind of like preparing without doing any taps and stuff. And then throughout my first couple matches, I started scoring higher than I usually do in comp. And then I rewatched the games. And my number one observation, my key takeaway, was I wasn't losing DAS hardly as often, and I wasn't misdropping hardly as often. And so even though if I was playing efficiently with no mistakes, I would be scoring higher with my old playstyle, it was a lot harder to maintain, and I generally made a lot more mistakes with my tapping. And so I was like, wow, like maybe I should start doing this more often. And so from that point onwards, and that would have been early 2022, the last several months, fast forward until like now, I've made a conscious effort to eliminate the need for tapping as much as I possibly can. I mean, I still use it, and there's situations where it is like undoubtedly way better than using DAS. But anytime it was like fringe or like I can go either way, I pretty much always use DAS for those now on because I just know that I have more control with it. So
does it also help then in DAS only tournaments? Well, the only place that you can use is DAS, so you eliminate the factor that you are playing against rollers and tappers.
Yeah, I think that's by far the biggest advantage for me is that, you know, I have a mentality where I know that I can beat any DAS player in the world. I may not win, but I know that I'm capable. And so I don't have to worry about falling behind in pace because I just simply can't stack as high and be as efficient as the other person. Like that dynamic doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I'm also, I think, you know, this is obviously debatable, but I think that my 18 game is probably one of the top in the world when it comes to DAS. And so a lot of times, you know, sometimes I'm ahead in pre-transition, but even the times that I'm not, I'm usually behind in lines, which I think this is a good time to bring up some of my comp strategy because I have some tips for those that want to play comp with DAS. Regardless of your playstyle, it's always advantageous to have fewer lines cleared than your opponent because you have more leeway to the kill screen, which means you have the ability to score more points in real time than the other person. And you have more information about what's happening in their game, right? And so part of the way that I've played 18 for the last year and a half in comp is obviously I'm trying to score as many points as I can, but the higher you stack, the quicker you play because the less time it takes for pieces to fall. So you have to balance being efficient with also not getting into high up digs. And there's also the dynamic where, and this is minor, but it does add up over the course of the game. A Tetris line clear is clearing 4 lines at once versus a single only clears 1. And so, but the line clear animation in terms of how long it takes for each one to happen is the same between the two. And so overall, taking 4 singles is way slower and puts you behind in lines more than taking 1 Tetris. And so a lot of times what you'll see me do, particularly in the very beginning of the game, but even like when I get back down to a low stack after getting a couple Tetrises in the middle, is I will intentionally take like a Z-skim on the right to fix parity and keep the board lower while I'm still building up because it takes longer to get Tetris ready and it puts me behind my opponent. And so those things combined, coupled with the fact that, you know, this would probably be a lot worse of a strategy against a tapper or a roller because I can't really afford to give away that many burns. But against a DAS player, especially knowing that very few DAS players can kill screen every single game, I know that I can kind of let them get ahead of me, and then sometimes I'll even be ahead into pre-transition, which is like a bonus. But even if I'm not, I'm very good at chasing scores down, and so it's kind of like no matter what the opponent does, I know that I have a strategy to combat it. So that's where the comfort level comes from for me.
How did you figure this out? How do you think about it that this is the way to go?
Slow runs, actually. Slow runs are how I figure this out. So for those who don't know, there is a very niche category of Tetris where you try to play the game as slow as possible. It involves starting on level 0, and you don't push down, and you basically try to keep the board as low as possible, with some exceptions, to try and make the pieces fall for as long as possible. And the longer the game lasts in real time, the better you do. And what I've learned is certain pieces, when oriented certain ways, will actually fall an extra row than if they weren't flipped at all. So for example, like the T piece, in spawn orientation, it points straight down.
Yeah.
And it takes exactly 18 shifts to go from the very top of the board all the way to the bottom. But if you flip that T piece 2 times and it's pointing to the sky, now it takes 19. And so you can literally increase the number of drops by 1. And on 18, that's 3 frames, which is, 1/20th of a second? So of course, in comp, that doesn't make much of a difference. But on level 0, it's 48 frames, which is almost a full second. And that adds up really fast. But then, of course, staying low is the objective in slow runs. And so I've gotten used to keeping a good stack where it's never more than like 1 or 2 rows high. And so that skill was kind of what helped me realize that in comp, like, hey, there's tangible ways to get behind in lines while not giving away too much pace in the process. So that was the big thing.
But that will work when you play matches which use max out club, because that is putting 2 players pretty much at real time against each other. If you play a regular restream, it's not always the case that you're behind.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's definitely situational. I still try to do it no matter what, just because if I can delay transitioning to level 19 by like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, that's another 5, 10, 15 seconds of real time that the opponent has to top out. Because you never know when they will, right? They might make a mistake, they might get a drought. You never know. Anything's possible. And so all things equal, it's always better to try and be earlier in the game than your opponent, because they may top out at some point, which will allow you to catch up. And so every once in a while during a restream, you might be starting 5 seconds early, 10 seconds early, 15. Even just being able to equalize that time difference and transition at the same time is infinitely better than transitioning, 10 seconds before your opponent.
I just hear higher mathematics to analyzing a game and how you handle competition.
Well, you see, when you take the derivative of the fall speed and divide by the octopus and the number, you find that it helps you win the game. So, but yeah, no, I'm a total nerd when it comes to this stuff. I have spreadsheets analyzing slow run theory to like the nth degree. Like, I don't know if you know this, but when you're on level 0 and you get to 9 lines on a slow run, before you get to level 1 and clear the 10th line, you actually want to delay your transition by about 2 pieces. It's based on the stack and how high it is, but if you could like transition right away, you want to take that piece, put it somewhere, take the next piece, put it somewhere, and then take the 3rd piece and transition with that one. And then you burn it down and get back to row 0, and then level 1 happens, and before you get to level 2, you want to wait 5 pieces. And then before you get to level 3, you want to wait another 5 pieces. And there's a specific number for each level, and it's all based on how many frames the current level versus the next level take to like drop a piece. So for example, level 0, it's 48 frames. Level 1, it's 43. Level 2, it's 38, et cetera, et cetera. You can do the math to figure out like the optimal transition delay to maximize the amount of time it takes to play the game. And so I'm like fascinated by all of those quirks of how long it takes for pieces to fall, and creating a strategy that combines like a different form of stacking with kind of like minimizing score, which there actually are instances where taking a Tetris is optimal in slow runs, which I think is also pretty cool. But you're trying to make it go as long as possible, and I don't know. I think it's really, really fun. Some people think it's boring as ever because, I mean, from level 0 to level 9, it's like almost 40 minutes or almost 35 minutes. So you can pretty much pick your nose and play at the same time, and you're fine. But I don't know. I think it's fascinating personally.
So how did you got into slow runs?
So Cheese posted something about having a slow run world record, and there was a discussion in the YouTube comment section. I don't know if it was that video or a different one, but we were just kind of, some people were going back and forth about like, who's interested in this, what are like some strategies that you use. At the time, I mean, Cheese had a lot of the basics down. Obviously, keep the stack low, and I want to say his time was like a 45:12 was the world record back then. And when I got it, I got like a 45:23 or something. And then he started rolling, and he got like a 47 or a 48-minute game, and so I can't really top that. But yeah, that's where it started. It was just like a random YouTube comment section of some random video. Actually, you know what it was? It was Scout's video about a different form that closely resembled slow runs, but wasn't exactly slow runs. It was like you're scoring as high as you possibly can, but you start on level 0 and you go for Tetrises, but you don't push down. So it's like similar, but you're actually going for score. In Game Scout's idea versus in this, you're going for, keeping the game going as long as possible. So it was in that video that we were talking.
Oh man! So your personal best is now for 45 minutes 36 seconds.
I actually beat that like a week ago. I have 45 minutes and 47 seconds now.
Let's go.
Yep.
So that's the DAS world record or the overall world record?
Definitely the DAS world record. I mean, I haven't seen anything from any other DAS players suggesting otherwise, but I know Doge, shout out to Doge again. He's got a 46-minute game. I don't know the exact digits, but it's at least 46 minutes. And then Cheese, if I recall correctly, has like a 47 or a 48-minute game. And then like what's really crazy is Eric's colors game was like 37 minutes. So Eric almost beat the world record, not even going for it, starting from like 18 or 19, which blows my mind. But
I think that if people go deep into colors, they will get the longest game in Tetris history.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially if they start from level 0. But even if you start from 19, I don't know enough about the game code-wise to know like when the game crash happens. But from rumblings I've heard about it, it sounds like it's based on your score, and that when you reach some score threshold relative to your line count, that's when the game is. And of course, we're nowhere near that point, in terms of getting deep into the colors. I think we've gotten at least halfway there from a line count perspective, but then again, I have no idea what I'm talking about, so who knows? But yeah, assuming that my understanding is at least somewhat accurate, I could see someone playing the game from like an 18 or a 19 start upwards of 50 minutes to like maybe even an hour before reaching the crash. And then of course, if you're starting from level 0 all the way to the crash, that could be like an hour 40, hour 50, which would be absolutely insane. I don't know who would watch that, but who knows?
I think you would watch that.
Maybe maybe I am crazy. I don't know.
So what is the most critical part of the slow run?
Oh, that's a tough question. I don't have my sheet in front of me because I've only done like maybe 20 of them by this point. So I definitely haven't perfected it, and it's not something I go for constantly, mostly because it's kind of boring for most of it. But I have like a redeemable thing on stream where if you give like, I think it's like 10,000 channel points, you can like force me to drop whatever I'm doing and do a slow run. So that's typically what I do them. But I play where I have my phone in front of me and it's got an image telling me the optimal transition delay for each level. And I don't remember the level off the top of my head, but there's one where it's actually best to build up like 12 pieces before you transition. So you're almost like you're for sure Tetris ready, and then you're almost like 5 or 6 rows high. And then you take a Tetris into the next level to get your board lower. I don't remember what level it is, but I think to me that's the really critical point, because even though you can force yourself not to transition for those 12 pieces, but if your board gets jagged or your board gets messed up in the process, you have to make a decision of whether you continue to hold out and then hope you get good pieces, or you transition early and you miss out on some of that time loss. And in this case, time loss is a good thing. In speedrunning, it's not. So for me, that's one critical point. The other one is I don't have the math fully worked out for this because it's very complicated with how fast the speed jumps. But 18 to 19, I'm relatively certain it's best to build up like as high as you possibly can. I'm talking like 10 rows high. Could be wrong on this because it's a little more complicated than the rest of the levels just because of how different 18 and 19 are. But that's another critical point. If you transition too early, then pieces start falling 50% faster earlier. And of course, that will speed things up, which is bad. And the final critical point is right before kill screen, because especially for DAS, you're not expecting to survive very long. So you hold out and do anything by any means necessary, not transition for as long as possible so that the speed doesn't double for as long as possible. And like the icing or the cream on top would be just to actually have a board set up where you can get like a level 30, and continue playing a little on the kill screen to waste even more time. I still have not gotten 30 in a slow run. I think I got 237 in my most recent game, but yeah, that would be the dream. And so 46 minutes with DAS is definitely possible. In fact, like I would go so far as to say like 46:10 is probably even pretty doable too, but I haven't done enough work with it yet to know for sure.
So you think like 46, 15 seconds is the upper limit?
Honestly, I don't know exactly. Because all of my runs thus far, I felt like we're pretty good, but I also have no competition to compare it against, because nobody's really doing it. But assuming that I understand the math of it, the mistakes that I've made are like 1 second or 2 second time losses, and those add up across the course of the game. But there's also an RNG component of like, it's a little different from a pace run where you have to play really efficiently for 10 minutes. Here, you have to have good RNG for 45 minutes, 46 minutes. So it's the same number of pieces, but it can drastically impact the outcome. So I really don't know. I'd say with my current understanding, I'd probably put the upper limit closer to like 46:20, 46:30, just because theoretically you can get to like close to level 31. Well, I guess theoretically you could get 31 because Andy's proven that with his amazing kill screen DAS play. And Memoria as well. I should shout out Memoria with that. But yeah, I'd say probably 46:20, 46:30 is the upper limit as I understand it. But I mean, I also said that 1.3 was never going to happen, and we've seen colors. So I really don't predict things very well, apparently.
Total Radness! Yo, this is Steve DeLuca of Total Radness, home of the Tetris World Order.
Bringing order to a chaotic world.
Ready to get rolling on the right side? Dominate the D-pad with a goofy foot controller. Visit TotalRadNES.com to score a controller modded by the inventor, me. We've also got TWO gear, CTWC approved hardware, and a ton of additional retrospective madness. Tune in to twitch.tv/Total Radness to watch Quaid and I take the BLV to 11. Also, don't miss the other homies at Aaron Jazamoki for the Boom Tetris house parties with the Kitchen Dwellers. And at Classic Vomps for those classic Tetris snugs. Be the best and keep it TWO for life.
We will return to the conversation in a minute, but first, Peace Dependency Podcast is available on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Every episode will be available at full length over on the Peace Dependency Podcast YouTube channel. Subscribe, rate, and like our content to get us notified. There's also a Peace Dependency YouTube channel. On this channel, you'll see podcast highlights, mini documentaries, and other NES-related topic videos. You can follow us on the socials at Peace Dependency. Peace Dependency is active on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Join the Tetris Friendlies Discord server. Besides the fact that it's the place to discuss anything Peace Dependency, you can also participate in some lovely friendlies or put your ELO on the line in the various ELO battles. Go to tinyurl.com/TetrisFriendlies to join the server. If you have a suggestion who we need to have on the next Peace Dependency podcast, let us know through the socials or our Discord channels. Now, let's go back to the conversation. You are the winner of both the test tournaments of CTDAS and the real tournaments of CTDAS. The test tournament was late 2021, and it was a pretty stacked tournament, even for a test tourney.
Yeah, for sure. I don't remember all the names off the top of my head, but I know Tristop was a part of it. Sharky, Tugi, Mark, I'm pretty sure was a part of it.
Mark wasn't for the test. No, for the test tournament. Pixelandy was there. We had Haps, for example, Sharky, Scotto. I can name them all. Pixelandy, DMJ, Tristop, Geo, Tuki, Sofa, Solid Sofa, you, Ian Keith, Pikarik, Torcha, Scotto, Alice, Haps. I have no clue who is higher average than Torcha on the challenge side. Sharky and Dimsy.
Yeah, I mean, you look at obviously the list is variable of who's the best DAS player, who's the second best, but I would say out of that field, you're looking at 10 to 12 of the top 20 DAS players in the world right there. It was a very stacked field for sure.
Yeah. The test tournament, even though it was a test tournament, 60 players entered, you had pretty much, like you said, 12 of the best DAS players in the world playing in the tournament. And you faced off against Tuki, who may or may not have a 1.3 at that time. You faced off against Tristop, who definitely had a 1.3 at that time. And then in the finals, you faced off against Haps, who is, one of the best DAS players in the current era.
Yeah, it was a crazy run for sure. All those matches were hype. I think I won all of them in the decider, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Also, shout out to Ian Keith, because that was your opponent in the first round, but you defeated Ian Keith 3-1, and then Tuki, Tristop, and Haps were all deciding matches.
Yeah. It was it was stressful to say the least. Because like any competition, and that was all. I think that was all played in one day, right? Or was it just the semis and finals in one day?
Against Tuki and Tristop was played on the same day, and then against Haps was a day later.
Okay. Yeah, it's playing. I remember now. Yeah, I played the semi against Tristop, and then the other semifinal match happened. The third place match happened, and then the final match happened with me against Haps.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of you play 5 games in the semis, and it went to the decider. There was bad RNG on both sides for certain parts of the game, which we all had to navigate. And then you have a 2 or 3 hour gap where you got to relax and decompress, and then somehow work your way back up to being ready, and then do it all over again for 7 games this time. So I am actually pretty proud of myself that I kept my mental in check throughout that entire tournament, because there were a lot of moments where I could have just gotten frustrated and given up when I still had a chance. But I was like, you know what? I got nothing to lose. Just stay the course, navigate the droughts. You'll get your opportunities. No one's perfect. People are going to make mistakes. People are going to get bad RNG. And eventually it worked out. But yeah, very stressful, very difficult tournament, and I'm thrilled that I was able to win it.
So I was thinking to myself right now, we see here Tuki, Tristop 1.3s, Haps 1.2. Is it different playing against a 1.2 player versus a 1.3 player, or does it really not matter because they all playing with DAS and I mean 1.3 is rare, but a 1.2 from a DAS player is also not what you see daily.
Oh yeah, it's I think you hit the nail on the head by saying when it's a DAS player, 1.2 versus 1.3 doesn't matter at all, I would say. And even like facing a 1.1 DAS player, the difference between a 1.1 player and a 1.2 with DAS is also pretty minimal. Like Ian Keith, I know I won 3-1, but it wasn't an easy match for sure. Ian's a very talented player. And I think at the time, I could be wrong on this, but Torja was a phenomenal DAS player, and I think was second in ELO, right behind Heps for DAS rankings for a long time, without even having a 1.2. And so there's some really talented DAS players out there who either don't go for paces often or just, whenever they go for it, they haven't gotten it or whatever. But I'd say when you're playing a DAS player, the PB is virtually irrelevant. When you're talking tappers and rollers, maybe there's an argument that a 1.3 player has, either some 29 efficiency or some maybe 600K post capabilities that a DAS player might not have.
Yeah.
So there's an argument to be made there, but yeah, with DAS players, I'd say it's pretty much irrelevant.
So you won the test tournament, and then we moved on to the real tournament. And Scamper 9 organized CTDAS. It's currently, I think the second test tournament is currently underway. But the rules for the CTDAS tournaments were very, very strict. Like it's pure DAS and Quicktap's, and well, we got to talk about the finals against Pixelandy because there was a little bit of controversy there, but it's pure DAS and Quicktap's. Those were allowed, and it was the first true DAS only tournament on a big scale, because for the real tournament 64 players entered, and well, I think nearly every major DAS player who is active in the online scene played in Classic Tetris DAS.
Yes, with one exception. I don't think that Adam played in that tournament.
No, Adam didn't play in that tournament.
Yeah. But pretty much other than Adam, and there's a couple other European players, but it was, pretty much everybody you could think of that was active in DAS competition play. I mean, they were all there. It was crazy.
Yeah, so you qualified 6th from the top of my head. And in the first round, you played against Josh Tullis, CTWC veteran, went to multiple CTWC. So how was it to play against Josh?
It was really cool, actually. Of course, during that binge watching period in late 2018, early 2019, I saw a lot of his games. And, just kind of how it was like to play Ben Mullen, to kind of experience what it's like playing someone who's been around for so long, and just kind of like the honor of being around some of these guys who are like, I don't want to say idols, but just, really cool people for me for a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was a pleasure to play Josh, and it was, from what I remember, it was a pretty competitive match. Both of us were transitioning consistently, and Josh was putting up some pretty high scores. So definitely a lot of fun, and good experience overall. So
then you moved on against Meme. Also, you won against Josh in his sweep. You moved on against Meme, also in his sweep. What do you think of that match?
So honestly, I don't remember a ton about the match with Meme, other than I was chatting with Rhubarb, and from what I understand, those two are also pretty close. And I was trying to get a scouting report on like what can I expect, because Meme is obviously a very talented tapper. I think at the time like had a high 1.3 PB, and so I'm thinking like this person's a very good stacker, probably very aggressive, but I had no knowledge of Meme's DAS skills, particularly in competition. So actually very afraid for that match, because I didn't know the optimal way to approach it. And so what I ended up doing was just playing generally a little safer game one, just so I can get some information. But honestly, my recollection beyond that is pretty scattered. So I'm not quite sure what happened during the match or afterwards. But yeah, I was actually somewhat worried, just because I didn't really have a lot to go off of prior to the match.
Yeah, but you won in a sweep, and then you moved on against Tugi once again. Tugi in a test tournament.
Yeah.
So you played 4 matches against Tugi, and you won 3 and lost 1.
Get wrecked, Tugi. Sorry, continue.
So so I get it why he's your rival. I mean, every time you play, you win 75% of the time.
Tugi and I, we go back a long time. There's things Tugi and I know about each other that I will not share here. But you know, we have our secrets. But we analyze stacking all the time. We VC all the time. Tugi's one of my best buddies in the whole community, so he's awesome.
You know what's funny with the test tournament, and with the actual tournament, you faced up against Tuki in the quarterfinals. You faced up against Tristop in the semifinals.
Yeah, the exact same order, exact same. Yeah.
The upper bracket, Pixelandy, seed number 1, was also going to the finals, just like you, defeated Sharky in a sweep. So, what was your mindset going into the finals against the number 1 seed Pixelandy?
Well, of course, Andy's one of the most experienced Tetris players in the world. Second place in the World Championships 1 year, third place another year. Has numerous DAS world records and achievements. I mean, everybody knows Andy, right? He's an absolute legend in this game. And so I knew that no matter what I did, it was going to be a tough match. But, going back to what I was talking about earlier, I really don't care who it is. If they're playing DAS, I know I can win. And so the main thing was just stick to the principles, do my best to get behind in lines, which of course came in really clutch in Game 7, which we can talk about. But just continuing to do what I was doing. Definitely put some emphasis on pace in some of the later games, because if I remember correctly, we kept swapping who was in the lead of the series, because I have to work backwards on this. So of course I won.
Yeah.
So up 3-2, which means that Andy was up 2-1, which means I was up 1-0. So like I won the first, then he won 2, then I won 2, yada yada yada, and then I ended up winning Game 7. So yeah. So in the later games, it was kind of like, especially when I was down 2-1, I'm like, if I drop Game 4 and I go down 3-1, I mean, it's pretty much over. And so that game, I really turned it on. And I don't remember the exact result of that game. I don't know if I outscored or if Andy early topped or what happened, but that was the kind of the turning point in the match of when I won that game. Not only did I have like already 4 games in a row of working on my competition play, but I committed to a more aggressive play style right between where I was comfortable playing and like my pace runs that I do on my own. And so from that point, I kind of felt like, hey, if I make good decisions here, like I will probably score high enough to win 2 out of these 3 games. And then thankfully it happened.
Game 6 was you were up 3-2.
Yep.
What was the mindset going into this game? Because you knew I have only 1 more game to win before I'm the champion.
Yeah, so I definitely tried to play as safe as I possibly could, while still maintaining some level of efficiency. But the mindset was, I can't believe I'm in a position to win this thing. Just don't pee your pants and screw it up. That was the mindset. And so I remember, I don't know if it was an early top, but it was post transition. I topped out in Game 6. Correct?
A level 23 top out.
Yes. And so I'll never forget that game, because even in the post transition, I'm pretty sure I was behind at the time. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make Andy earn it. I'm going to go all the way to kill screen. I'm going to get my 800K, 850, whatever I get. If he beats that, fine. I'm going to force him to do it again, right? And if he can outlast me 2 games in a row, then so be it, right? That was kind of the mindset that game. But then, in an effort to play safe, I played quote unquote too safe. Thinking, oh, let's make a burn to keep the stack low. But it ended up kind of ruining my board in a way, and then I misdropped on top of that ruined board, and it just fell apart. And so it actually hurt me in a sense that I tried to play a little too safe, and it was out of my comfort zone, and that's why I topped out. And then going into Game 7, I was like, I mean, my hands were just drenched in sweat. I had a headache. I mean, there was so much pressure. I'd been playing for so long. It was like really late. So it was just like, I mean, the atmosphere and the pressure was just unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, adrenaline up the yazoo.
Going fast forward to game 7, we go to level 25, level 26. You're roughly 200,000 points behind Andy at that moment.
Yeah, and for a split second, actually, I was 230,000 behind.
So you know you're 200,000 points behind. You know you're 20 lines behind. So did you saw any lights, or did you knew that you had any chance of winning that game?
At that point, once I got to like 26, you can even see kind of like my reaction when I made that misdrop with the Z piece. I kind of sighed and like my head dropped a little. At that point, I thought it was over. But I'm like, let's just try to put on a show. Let's not get demolished in the final game. Let's see what I can do. And so that was the moment that I committed to playing basically perfectly. I knew I had two or three burns left at that point. So I'm like, take those burns, clean up the stack, and then don't take any more. And so the first like probably Tetris or two was just me kind of like sulking, like, okay, let's just keep going, see what happens. But then at that moment, that was when I got enough information to know like, oh, I could actually win this thing. And so then I just kept going and the pieces kept coming, and I made good enough decisions that eventually it worked out. But yeah, to answer your question, in the beginning I thought it was over, like it was right after that misdrop.
So you were accepting your defeat in game 7 at that moment.
Yeah, accepting my defeat whilst also just trying to put on a good show, and miraculously, if there was even a way, just give myself some sort of shot, but not expect it to even come to anything.
So basically, what you wanted to do in game 6 is what you did in game 7.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So Andy topped out at 940,000 points. You were late level 27, maybe early level 28. And because you misdropped that Zap piece, your Tetris well got shifted from the right side to the center well. And you were stacking upwards. So when Andy topped out at 940,000 points, did you know at that moment what you needed to do to win or to get very close?
Yes, and that was the one kind of silver lining of doing all these pace runs. Is the second Andy topped out, and I glanced over at Max Out Club, and saw the deficit. I knew exactly what I had to do, and I knew that I had 0 burns, and I had to get an extra kill screen Tetris. So that's the one thing, is if I didn't play like a maniac on my own, I probably wouldn't have known that, and I might have taken some burns and lost. But who knows? So I actually knew a little bit before Scamper like pointed it out, but it was relatively simultaneous. Like Scamper was talking about going for an extra Tetris well before the kill screen, but I did figure it out like a couple seconds or maybe like 10 seconds before he actually called it out. So
yeah, so you took a Tetris on level 28. You got to line 229, and then you made a very aggressive quick tap with a long bar all the way to the left side. What was it? How many rows up?
It was 7. So it wasn't the almighty 8 high quick tap, but yes, it was 7. So it did require a quick tap.
So because you had a center well, you had a stack on the left side, or you had a stack on the right side, and you knew that you only had 1 Tetris left on 28 and needed to get great RNG to get a long bar on 29 to get that center well Tetris. That long bar came and you pretty much had no use for it. Did you know instantly that you needed to put that long bar all the way on the left side?
I don't know about instantly. I mean, my brain was working faster at that exact moment than it probably ever has. But I remember the stack. I was already built out 8 or 9 rows high on the right, and the previous piece before the long bar was a Z piece, which I placed in the center of the board. And I don't want to give away too many secrets here, but I guess I have to. When you're trying to wall charge, it's infinitely easier to wall charge one way and have the piece travel the opposite way than it is to wall charge one way and have the next piece travel the same way. And so the fact that I was able to wall charge to the right made moving the long bar to the left a lot easier. And then, of course, my stack was too high on the right to like reliably put the long bar over there after the Z piece. And so it was like, I'm going left with this, and I'm just gonna like make a split-second decision to take the Tetris or build out. But I'm like, I have to build out because I'm not even close to being built out on the left. And if you're 3 high on 19, you quick taps or anything, you can't get anything over. So like when I saw the next piece, I'm like, okay, we're going left. And then as the piece was falling, I'm like, well, I have to go all the way left. So which means I have to do this quick tap. And then thankfully I got it, because if I didn't, that was game over.
So it was either way, you tried your best, or you would become the hero.
Yeah, pretty much.
So then you needed to build up your left stack a little bit higher, I think 1 or 2 rows higher. Then you got your long bar to go into kill screen. And then you got another long bar, and the only thing you needed to do was rotate that to win it.
Yeah, I think it was a rotation in either like 1 or 2 shifts, probably 1 shift. It's kind of embarrassing. I've been playing this game for almost 3 years. I still don't know the spawn orientations by heart. You'd think I would. But yeah, it was the move itself was very easy, just because of the way the center wall works. If it was a right well, forget it. Like I've actually never executed the perfect right well quick tap to get a Tetris on 29. It's unbelievably difficult. But yeah, I think it was would have been a column 5 well, because the bar went in 1, and then the T piece went 2, 3, 4. So yeah, it's probably about 1 shift, maybe 2.
Do you think that was the luckiest you ever got with RNG?
Honestly, no. And so here's the thing is, that game had everything. I was ahead close to 150,000 pre-transition. And then right before transition, I was going for an aggressive placement building out my left, and then I didn't quite get the piece there, so it created a hole up top. And then a combination of bad RNG and bad placements. Basically, I didn't get a Tetris for like 40 or 50 lines. So from like 110 to like 150-ish lines, I think, I didn't get any Tetrises. And then I went on a little run from like 23 to 24-ish, or 22 to 24. Something like that. And then again, I had this Fractal actually calculated it for me, so shout out to Fractal. Also for clearing my name, but also for this. He told me that I had like 30 something or 40 something pieces of Tetris readiness in a row where I didn't get a long bar. So it wasn't like a 40 piece drought, but it was like, oh, I'm Tetris ready for 15 pieces, and then I'm forced to plug the well. And then long bars come, and then I unplug it, and then drought again, and then plug, and then long, over and over and over. So 40 like consecutive Tetris readiness moments where I could have gotten a long bar, I didn't. And so that's really what put me that far behind. It wasn't so much a dig, because I was only like 80 to 110,000 behind going into 23, and it just kept growing because Andy was Tetrising and I wasn't. Now I'm not complaining. I'm just kind of stating what happened, right? And so to me, I don't believe in karma. I'm a Christian, but I do think that the game was kind of making up for itself in a way in the end. But no, the luckiest game for me by far was my very first 19 max out. And I wish I could tell you the date. I don't know off the top of my head what it was. But I actually went perfect from level 25 onwards to get a max out into the kill screen.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so 25, 26, 27, 28. 4 straight levels of perfection on my very first 19 max. And somehow I have 101 level 25 maxes today, and I still don't have a 1.3. I still haven't found a way to go perfect 25, 26, 27, 28 again. So,
I hear the frustration about 1.3. We mentioned the aggro, the aggressive long bar quick tap all the way to the left, 7 high. And after the final was done, there was some rumblings that the piece placement that you didn't fall between the limits of DAS and the quick taps.
Right.
So how did you respond to that? And like, we know it because Fractal did all the amazing work that it was within the limits of the DAS with a quick tap, but hearing that you might have cheated or maybe not played the game with the limits of DAS, how did you feel about that you got those accusations?
Well, obviously it wasn't ideal, but given my history of, I had obviously the 19.1.2 back in June of last year, where I thought that it was DAS, but it wasn't. And there's always that question mark of like, well, obviously he's still slow tapping here and there, because I don't care what anybody says. None of the top DAS players can just DAS everything. Like everyone, either on purpose or by accident, loses DAS throughout the game. I'm sorry. Like if anybody thinks that exists, like no. Is it possible? Yes. Nobody does it. There's no reason to. Right? Everybody slow taps pieces in the middle of the board, sometimes 4 hertz, 5 hertz. It's very common, right?
Yeah.
But of course, I'm capable of doing it faster than 10 hertz. And so there's always going to be that question mark, like, well, the video looks weird. Did he do it? How do we figure this out? And I don't blame anybody for that, right? Because if I was in Andy's shoes or Scamper's shoes, right, and I have to look at this and say, did he cheat, right? Like that's a $240 swing, right? Because the winner, we were both guaranteed 240 in the prize pool at that point, and the winner got another 240, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big deal, right? And if I was Andy, and and I potentially got cheated out of that money, I would want it to be rectified. So it didn't upset me. But like a lot of that started very shortly after the conclusion of the match, like probably within an hour or two. And I mentioned that the match was pretty late. I think we finished up around 11 p.m. or midnight local time, something like that.
Yeah.
And just the overflowing of adrenaline. And I'm going to be honest, my celebration, it wasn't picked up on the mainstream, but I literally destroyed my voice for like 2 weeks. I lost my voice for a week. And the second week, it was just like raspy. And like every time I talked, it hurt. I mean, I shouted as loud as I ever have. And I had a headache, and just like my eyes hurt, and everything was just like throbbing, but enjoying, of course.
Yeah.
And so after the match was over, I'm in VC with my buddies, and Fractal was there, and he was like, I'm not convinced you cheated. Like, I think like this doesn't look that weird, and it is Max Out Club, so let's like dig into it. And so again, big shout out to Fractal, and big thank you to Fractal for doing the investigation and proving my innocence. I knew I didn't do anything wrong the whole time, but obviously, in good form, didn't want to say anything until a decision was made one way or the other. And thankfully we got it right. And, we moved on, and everything was fine. So yeah, no long answer to a short question, but yeah, I didn't have any problem with it. Definitely.
But what if, because the footage that was reviewed was from Max Out Club, which runs at 30 FPS. The game runs at 60 FPS, so we lose every other frame.
Right.
So what if the conclusion was that this wasn't within the limits of DAS, and that you did it within the limits of DAS? Was it something you potentially could accept, or would you create a big fuss about it?
Well, thankfully it didn't happen, so I'll never have to go through it. But I'd like to think I wouldn't make a huge fuss, but I definitely would have fought back against it. It's obviously cheating is not cool. People make mistakes, and sometimes we think we're getting away with it, and then we get caught, and it's the worst feeling. But I make it a point to not do that stuff, just because like sportsmanship is important. Money's on the line, reputation's on the line, and then what does it say about yourself if you're okay with like saying, oh, like I'm telling the truth, I quick tapped it, but in the event that, let's say I actually tapped it and I just got away with it, like I wouldn't be able to live with myself, right? I just took $240 away from a teenager, right? And not to mention, like would have caused one of the biggest controversies on in the scene, and that could have possibly damaged the reputation of Tetris. Like I don't want to be responsible for that, so if it had gone the other way, I definitely want to push back, knowing that I didn't do anything wrong. But I don't know. Maybe ask for further investigation, or I don't even know if there's a way to like look at it from the hand cam or whatever. But I would have been begging for like any avenue, just like, please let me prove it somehow.
Yeah. So, but luckily it didn't happen. Your name got cleared. I think Scamper's name. Scamper was very relieved that that it wasn't cheated and all that, because, like I said, it was the first real DAS tournament. It was big money on the line, one of the biggest tournaments outside of CTM in terms of prize pool. So, and it is the start of the DAS only tournaments. And later that year, later in 2022, we had the DAS World Cup, which was organized by Classic Tetris Germany. We had them on the podcast in June.
Yeah.
But when the DAS World Cup got announced, some players starting to say that this isn't a true world championship, and that the tournament that Scamper was hosting, the Classic Tetris DAS, that was the true world championship, because a lot of the Americans couldn't make the trip to Germany. So you won't have the best DAS players all at one place. So how can that be a true world championship? So how do you feel about that, the criticism about that the DAS World Cup wasn't a true world championship?
I mean, I understand arguments from both sides. You can compare similarly like CTM versus CTWC. But to me, like it, and this is maybe not a popular opinion, maybe it is, I don't know. But a world championship has to have some level of formality to it, right? And CTM overall is a very formal tournament. Scamper's Classic Tetris DAS tournament was, I think, the best online DAS tournament we've ever seen, and possibly one of the best online tournaments, period, to date. I mean, it was phenomenal. And so, both of them are extremely formal, but of course, CTWC, their brand and their history and their outreach, of course, is much greater than any of the online scene's counterparts. And so, to me, I definitely understand the argument of, hey, this is the official, like, sanctioned DAS World Championship hosted by CTWC. And in that regard, I absolutely believe that the tournament in Germany was the World Championships, and it doesn't bother me at all. But I also understand the other argument of like, hey, I wasn't there. All the other American players weren't there. Several other players maybe from other countries who aren't that close to the tournament in Germany, they weren't there. It's like, who knows what would happen if we were all there, right? Like, we'll never know, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully next year, a lot more of us can make it. I can't promise anything, but that does fall between two exams that I'm taking next year. So there is a good shot I will be available, and I will do everything I can to make it out. But yeah, I mean, we'll never know. And so, yeah, to me, I think if you had to compare the competition in both, personally, I think that the Scampers Classic Tetris DAS tournament had a higher level of competition overall. But then again, I think the finals of CTWC DAS, Adam versus Schnecke, my personal opinion, that was hands down the best DAS match of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think my final game against Andy was the greatest DAS game of all time, like in terms of competition, right? The individual game. But the match between Adam and Schnecke, that full 7-game set, was just some of the highest quality Tetris from a DAS standpoint I've ever seen. And then, of course, the climax of it was Adam's insane dig in Game 7 to survive and clutching out the victory at the very end. It was, I mean, it hit everything, and the crowd was going berserk. Shout out to Alp Altum for the insane. I mean, Alp's awesome. And I'd love to have Alp commentate more on my matches because he's great. But yeah, atmosphere, it hit everything. Atmosphere, high level play, some of the biggest names in the scene. So yeah, I think if I have to give an answer, the German tournament, the CTWC DAS, that's the World Championship. But I still think the one that I won was a little tougher. But that's just me.
So what do you think of AdamMTS?
Well, we actually have VC'd once to go over stacking, and he made me feel like an idiot. in a nice way. Like he was a very kind analyst. But yeah, everything I thought I knew about stacking, he kind of turned it on its head. And it was actually shortly after I spoke with him that I actually had a run of like 2 or 3 more 1.2s on 19 with DAS. Because I actually figured out things like getting Tetris ready a little bit faster and some parity management techniques and some adjustments. And it was a variety of things, but we both got together to try and make each other better players. But I definitely think that I got more out of the conversation than he did. There were, some ideas that I gave him that he pondered, and a couple that he's like, "Oh, you're right." But the vast majority, when we paused the video and started looking at stuff, I'm like, "Oh, you're right. Why didn't I do that? Oh, that's a great adjustment. Why didn't I see that? Oh, this, oh, that." So yeah. So I mean, Adam is. I think he's probably one of the best, if not the best, DAS stackers in the world, and possibly even one of the best stackers, period, regardless of playstyle.
Yeah.
And of course, just king of consistency. He's, in my opinion, number 1 PAL player in the world by skill. Of course, you can talk about some rollers and fractals colors and all that. All amazing achievements, but the skill that it takes to play kill screen with DAS on PAL, Adam is unmatched in that regard. So, yeah, I mean, he's a very strong player. Out of anybody in the world, if I could pick any DAS player to play against, he's towards the bottom of the list because, my goodness, it's like that's a scary match.
Well,
but then again, it would be a lot of fun because I don't think we've played yet, have we?
well, not yet. Because I think you know what I'm going. Because I have a little bit of inside information.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I do. Kingsman was in my chat when I announced that you were going on the show, and I mean, one of the dream matches of 2022 is going to be NGC Man versus AdamMTS. Who is the true DAS Master of 2022? You have the unofficial official World Championship, CTDAS. NGC Man came out at the top. You have the official DAS World Championship, AdamMTS came out at the top. What happens if you put them in the match? And when the podcast airs, that match has happened.
Right.
December 30th on the Friendly's Revolution Super Show. So what do you think will happen when you face off against Adam?
To be quite honest, what I'm expecting to happen is that one of us is going to be on their game and one of us is not, and it's going to be a sweep or like a 3-1 or a 4-1 victory, one way or the other. And I say that just because, maybe it'll be me that just craps the bed and then Adam just destroys me. Maybe it's Adam who craps the bed. But it's like end of the year, it's holiday time. Yes, it's kind of like a fun, high stakes match, but at the end of the day, it's a small sample size, and it's just like any tournament. Usually the winner is someone who is just on their game that day. And, I did win both the test and the real tournaments. But if you compare my comp performance, like on those days and then between the 2 events, obviously I won all my matches for those 2 tournaments, but between I played some CTL sets and lost like almost all of them. I was losing round 1 in CTM a couple of times. And so I just had really, really good days. So I don't know. It's like it's a small sample size. It's for that reason. It's hard to believe that it's going to be high intensity, high scoring, all 7 games. Of course, I would love if it goes that way, and if it does, best man win. But yeah, we'll see. It's maybe not the best mindset to think the way I am, but I don't know. I'm just kind of practical in that way. It's like, well, who knows? So,
but what is it then with the mindset I can beat anyone?
Well, I can is the thing. Like as good as Adam is, I've beaten Andy, I've beaten Heps, I've beaten Tritstop, I've beaten Tugi, right? I mean, I've beaten 1.3 DAS players. I've beaten people that are way higher elo than me. I've beaten Dog. I mean,
yeah.
I got very lucky, of course. 2 early top outs in a WPL way back in the day. But I'm proud to say that I've beaten both are Tiago brothers. I don't know how many people can say that, but like I know I can beat anybody if I'm on my game, unless they're a roller, you know. So that's just kind of the mindset. Whatever happens, happens. Play my game, and I think especially after winning those 2 tournaments, my mental fortitude and comp has gotten a lot better. I would still say it's the weak point of my game, but it's much less of a weakness than it was for a long time. And so as long as I just keep my cool and, you know, don't try to do too much, then, you know, usually I'm all right. So.
Any predictions?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I did bet on myself to win the real tournament, and I had a perfect bracket, so I predicted all the winners, including myself. So I got to bet on myself again. If I had to predict the match score, going with the theme from before, if it's a best of 5, I'm going to predict that I win 3-1. If it's a best of 7, I'm going to predict that I win, let's say 4-2. And when Adam beats me and this plays a couple weeks later, please, everybody in the comments, make fun of me, and we'll go from there. But we'll see.
I mean, it's a week later. I think we air the show.
Yeah. So hopefully, I'm excited though. It's going to be a lot of fun. Definitely, after Adam won, I would be lying if I said that. Oh, you know, I won this, he won that. End of story. Like, of course, I've wanted this to happen, but shout out to Kingsman for initiating it. It was his idea in the first place, so I'm just glad to be a part of it. That event's going to be amazing. I don't know all the players, but I know that there's going to be some epic rolling matches, and of course, you know, Adam and I playing the DAS playstyle. Kingsman's going to go all out for that event, and I'm all for it. So just glad to be a part of everything.
You're a numbers guy. Adam is not a fan of single, like a best of 5, best of 7 matches. I think you two would be great in the best of 99 match.
So actually, funny story about best of 99s. I actually was supposed to do one with Ben Mullen, but for the same reason I missed CTWC, the exam studies were just eating up too much time and I couldn't commit to it, which really bums me out because doing a best of 99 with my hero would have been like the best thing ever. But with Adam, you know, I'll be honest, I'm actually busier next year than I was this year. So probably not realistic for next year, but if we're both still around in our old age of whatever, 23, then maybe we start it. We'll see. But yeah, it's going to be tough next year.
Oh man, old age of 23. I feel like an old timer.
I'm 23 going on 75, man. I feel like a geezer. I remember having all this energy in high school, playing sports and moving around and stuff. Now I like pick up a baseball and I'm just like, oh, my back.
I'm 26. I'm like, oh my god. All the young guys. 26 is old in the community.
How old was Alex T? Like 14? I mean, all the best players are like 18 or lower.
Why do you think I'm still a 600k player and am not playing regularly and doing restreams and podcasting and commentating?
Well, it's because you're too modest. You have a 4 million PB in the vault, but you don't want anybody to feel bad. You know, so you're not sharing it, but it's, you know, it's okay.
It does mean that I'm the best Benelux player, and that's untrue because Sitnev is not the best Benelux player. We have a meme in the Benelux scene that Art 1998 is the best Benelux player ever, although he has everything in the vault, so he just pretends that he is a 600k player.
Well, I mean, certainly he has the most wins, right?
Definitely.
Right, so therefore he's the best. I mean, that logic seems to check out, right? Actuarially speaking, he's got the most wins, so you know.
In that case, Rory or Mart is the true best, the best player.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks.
Hey, NGC, it was a great time, but I have one more final question before I let you go, and that is, what are your plans for 2023? Tetris-wise.
Tetris-wise, okay. So, well, obviously the 1.3 grind is still ongoing, so that's the first priority. If I get that next year, I will definitely experiment with rolling, but I'm not going to let peer pressure dictate my decisions. If it ends up being too difficult or I just don't have a lot of fun with it, I'm not going to push myself. Like I said, when I started this game, 1.3 was my goal, and everything after that is just kind of continuing to play because I enjoy the game and the community. So once I get the 1.3, I'd love to go to some more or go to some in-person events. I am actually targeting, in addition to the DAS World Championships in Germany, I'm also targeting the Illinois qual and possibly the Ohio qual as well. I have to check my schedule to see if those are feasible, but if they are, I'd love to be a part of those. And yeah, I will do everything I can to make CTWC in person next year. But like I said already, it's pretty unlikely given the exam schedule coming up. So we'll see. But Tetris wise, I think 1.3 above all else, and then in-person stuff, and we'll go from there. But I'm not going anywhere. I'll be a part of this community for as long as it's around. I mean, it's a great group of people, tons of fun, and just gives me great solace to spend time with people and stay connected with the people that I've made these friendships with over the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm not going anywhere.
NGC Man, thanks so much for joining me on our podcast this month. It was a true pleasure.
Thank you. This has been amazing. Truly one of the bucket list, for lack of better words, experiences for me. Thank you so much for having me. I've had a blast, and I'll talk to you soon.
And with that all being said, this will be the end of the Peace Dependency podcast. Thank you all for listening, and make sure you follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Don't forget to join the Tetris Friendly's Discord server and follow me on the socials @SirMazer. For now, have a great Tetris month, and I will see you all in February. Bye! The Peace Dependency podcast was brought to you by Total Red NES. Shop your Goofy Food Controller TWO merch and CTWC approved hardware on TotalRedNES.com.